Hi guys, Ramon Goose here, and in this video we're going to be looking at the guitars of Elvis Presley. Elvis was born in Tupelo, Mississippi in the United States on January the 8th, 1935. In September 1941, Elvis entered his first grade at school. He was encouraged to enter a singing contest after impressing his school teacher with a rendition of Red Foley's country song, Old Shep. The contest was held at the Mississippi Alabama Fair and Dairy Show on October the 3rd, 1945, and this was his first public performance. He was 10 years old. On Elvis's 11th birthday, on January the 8th, 1946, his parents buy him his first guitar at the Tupelo hardware store. His mother, Gladys Presley, tells the story that Elvis wanted a bicycle, but she was put off both by the cost and by her fears that he might get hurt. Other accounts also have Elvis wanting to buy a .22 caliber rifle. But in the same store that they sold the rifles, they also sold guitars. And it was in this store that he picked out a 1940s K model acoustic guitar. According to the store owner, F.L. Bobo, the guitar cost $7.75. Several people helped Elvis learn to play this new guitar. Two uncles taught him some chords, but it was a new pastor called Frank Smith who really helped Elvis learn the guitar. In the 7th grade, Elvis began taking his guitar to school almost every day. He would play and sing in the school basement. At that time, the local radio was dominated by country and western music. However, also from the radio, Elvis absorbed the blues. He would quite often try to emulate artists such as Arthur Crudup. Elvis knew all of Hank Snow's songs, and he was also influenced by records by singers such as Roy Acuff, Ernest Tubb, Ted Daffin, Jimmy Rogers, Jimmy Davis, and Bob Willis. The Southern gospel singer Jake Hess, one of his favourite performers, was a significant influence on his ballad singing style. Many of his future recordings were inspired by local musicians such as Arthur Crudup and Rufus Thomas. B.B. King recalled that he had known Presley before he was popular, when they both used to frequent Beale Street. He used his guitar throughout his school years and quite possibly on his first Sun recording sessions. There are a couple of stories about the history of this guitar. One is that Elvis gave the guitar to his friend, Red West, when he was enrolled in Jones County College. Then Red gave it to his friend Ronnie Williams, who bequeathed it to his brother William. The other story states that Elvis traded the K guitar at the OK Hewitt Piano Company in Memphis when he purchased a Martin guitar. The story goes on to say, upon selling Elvis the Martin guitar, the store promptly threw the K instrument in the trash. Unfortunately, we're lacking any known photos of Elvis with this guitar from that time frame. So it can't be proved one way or the other if this actual guitar in this photo belonged to Elvis Presley. Here in this photo you can see the guitar being held together by tape and it has no strings. Elvis checked into the offices of Sun Records. He aimed to pay for a few minutes of studio time to record a two-sided acetate disc, My Happiness and That's When Your Heartache Begins. He later claimed that he intended the record as a birthday gift for his mother, or that he was merely interested in what he sounded like. In 1954, Elvis purchased a 1936 Martin 0018 from the OK Hewitt Piano Company in Memphis, Tennessee. This guitar was purchased for $5 down and $10 a month, which cost $79.50 in 1954. Included in the purchase was a set of autogram metallic letters that spelled Elvis. Also in 1954, Elvis bought a Recording King guitar. This was an instrument which was sold at the Montgomery Ward store in Memphis. Although there is no photographic evidence of him ever using this guitar, he eventually gave it away to a famous harness horse racer by the name of Delvin G. Miller in 1964. It has a note from Elvis to Miller inside the guitar's body, and it currently resides in a private collection. Elvis was not happy with the sound of the Martin 0018 that he had purchased from the OK Hewitt Piano Company. And in November of 1954, he traded it for a 1942 Martin D18. Essentially, this guitar had a larger body. After acquiring this guitar, he put on the same metallic letters that were on the previous guitars. At the time, a new D18 would have sold for around $140, including a case which would have been about $40. So bear in mind that this would have been a used guitar, and maybe Elvis would have got between 25% and 40% off that. As you can see from this photo, there is some excessive wear around the soundhole and bridge area of the guitar. To quote Scotty Moore, "He'd break strings all the time. In the early days, he'd just keep beating on it until we got through the set. Many of these guitars, which were produced during the war years, which were 1942 to 1945, used open-back tuning machines with plastic buttons to conserve metal. Elvis's was at some point prior to his purchase installed with Kluson sealed case tuners. These were regularly used on many guitars in the 1950s. D18 guitar featured a mahogany neck, 20-fret rosewood fingerboard, a 25.4-inch scale length, solid spruce top, mahogany back and sides, and rosewood bridge. Between June and July of 1955, Elvis replaced his 1942 Martin D18 for a Martin D28, which was believed to have been from either 1955 or 1954. Again, purchased from the OK Hewitt Piano Company in Memphis. Owner of the shop, Sid Lapworth, who sold the guitar to Elvis, has stated that it was quite possibly a used instrument. At the time, a D28 would have sold for $210. After he purchased the guitar, he also began using a custom-made tooled leather cover, which had his name Elvis Presley across the front of it. This leather cover was made by Marcus Van Story in the basement of the OK Hewitt store. Scotty Moore has stated that Elvis used this guitar for most of the recording and performing until October of 1956. Around August 1955, Elvis had to have some of the leather trimmed back due to his excessive strumming style. The guitar featured Kluson super tuning machines. It had a 20-inch body length, a 15 5/8 body width, and a 4 7/8 inch body depth. It featured a solid mahogany neck, a 20-fret ebony fingerboard with a 25.4-inch scale length. It had a solid spruce top, rosewood back and sides, and came with an ebony bridge. The whereabouts of this guitar is currently unknown. In October 1956, Scotty Moore landed an endorsement deal with Gibson. Through this endorsement, Elvis acquired and began using a new Gibson J200N guitar, which had the serial number A22937. Sip Lapworth of the OK Hewitt Piano Company said that they had hoped to present it to Elvis personally on an evening after the store had closed, but Elvis was delayed and never made it to the store. Instead, Scotty Moore picked up the guitar and Gibson invoiced it to him because the Colonel would not allow an endorsement for Elvis. So after October 1956, this was used in concerts and to record by Elvis. Here you can see Elvis on stage at Baxter County Coliseum on October 14th, 1956. A similar guitar was purchased by the film company Paramount for use in the movies Loving You and King Creole. The Gibson J200 flat top guitar came with a solid spruce top, solid Eastern curly maple back and sides and neck, rosewood fretboard, and a moustache bridge with mother of pearl crown inlays on the fretboard. It also came with a double inlay on the bridge, gold Kluson tuners, and pearloid keystone buttons. In January 1957, the guitar appears during rehearsal shots for Elvis's final Ed Sullivan show. As you can see from the photos here, it has a tooled leather cover custom made by Charles Underwood. Elvis used the J200 with the cover exclusively for all 20 live appearances in 1957. In 1960, when he returned to civilian life after 2 years serving in the US Army, Elvis asked Scotty Moore to send the well-worn instrument out to be refurbished. The work wasn't done in time for Elvis's March 20th recording session in Nashville, so a new 1960 J200N was shipped as a replacement. In GI Blues, his first movie after returning from the army, he can be seen playing the Paramount J200, which was almost identical to his own 1956 J200. Scotty Moore wrote to Gibson representatives Jerry Woodworth and Clarence Havinger, requesting that the guitar be refinished, repaired, and have Elvis's name inlaid on the fretboard. He also requested for some additional inlay work on the front. Nothing elaborate, but something different that Elvis might like, a design of their own discretion. When this model came back, the old red floral pickguard design had been replaced with a new black pickguard with a modern design and the name Elvis Presley inlaid on the fingerboard as requested. Elvis used the customised 1956 J200 in the first few of the only few live appearances in 1960. These were in Memphis and Hawaii. In 1969, when he returned to performing live, he used his guitar on stage again. He continued to perform with it in concert as late as 1971. Both the guitar and the Underwood-made cover are part of the permanent collection on display at Graceland. It was in 1958, when Elvis was drafted into the United States Army, While stationed in Germany, his friend Lamar Fick purchased a German guitar for Elvis called an Isana. This was a jazz-style archtop instrument with sound holes that resembled the letter S. Elvis may have owned a couple of these guitars. One had a floating pickup, but was constructed in a way as to be played without amplification. Elvis used these guitars during his military service, and when he was discharged, gave them away to some local men that he had befriended. Isana guitars were handmade German archtops built by Ignaz Sandner, one of the very small guitar makers that were based in Germany during the post-war years. This style of guitar was very common in Germany when Elvis was based there. The company was very small, and nowadays Isanas are quite rare. They were handmade and very good quality instruments, and apparently better quality than the equivalent Framus and Hofner models. The guitar came installed with a floating pickup called Ideal. When Elvis was staying in Germany at his rented house, Elvis would set aside hours where fans could go to the house and he would sign autographs. It's said that Elvis gave his guitars to 2 kids who came up to the house on a scooter asking for autographs. In 1960, when Elvis returned to civilian life after 2 years in the US Army, Elvis asked Scotty Moore to send his well-worn 1956 J100 out to be refurbished. Scotty Moore shipped the guitar to Gibson in Chicago via the music store OK Hook. The work wasn't done in time for Elvis's March the 20th recording session in Nashville, so a new 1960 J200N serial number A32944 was shipped on the 18th of March 1960. The guitar was invoiced to Scotty, and Gibson were completely out of the cases that normally shipped with this guitar, so instead another flannel-lined case was shipped instead. This was explained in a letter written to Chet Atkins, as the guitar was shipped to Scotty via Chet at the RCA recording studios in Nashville. This may explain some confusion regarding the serial numbers and the return of the original 1956 J200. Here you can see Elvis on the NBC TV special from 1968 with his 1960 J200. And here you can see the same guitar with Scotty Moore. The guitar almost looked identical to the 1956 model that he owned, except for the Grover Rotomatic tuners. Elvis kept this new J200 for the rest of his life, and still to this day, this guitar is part of the Elvis collection at Graceland. As mentioned earlier, Elvis used his newer 1960 Gibson J200 for the 1968 Elvis Comeback Special. And for this same show, Elvis borrowed a 1968 Hagstrom Viking electric guitar from session player Al Casey. During the taping, the show's producer asked if any of the musicians had a flashy looking instrument that Elvis could use. Al Casey had this guitar in the boot of his car. The background of the scene was red, with silhouettes of guitar players. As you can see in this photo, Elvis is wearing all black with a red bandana and was holding his bright red Hagstrom Viking. It was a very striking combination. And though Elvis did not own the guitar, it became a great prop. Al Casey, of course, was one of the top Californian session players of the 1960s and 70s. This guitar was manufactured only in the years 1967 and 1968. During this period, 1,350 guitars were made. This model, called the Viking 2, features gold-plated hardware, select flame maple and spruce woods, and was available in mahogany sunburst or cherry red. It had a lightweight 16-inch thin-line double cutaway arched body, heavy celluloid binding, 2 pickups with separate volume and tone controls, 3-way toggle switch for the treble, bass or both pickups, and a Micromatic adjustable bridge. This guitar was reminiscent of the Fender Coronado in design, and as you can see, this model also featured Fender's trademark headstock shape. During the 2 stand-up live performances taped at NBC's Burbank studio on June the 29th on 1968, the amplifier used with Al Casey's Hagstrom was his Benson 200 amplifier. Al said once Elvis had a guitar to play, he needed an amp to play it through, and the Benson is what I had with me. The Benson 200 amplifier had a 12-inch Vox speaker with 2 4-inch Jensen constant series speakers switchable on or off depending on the required sound. It produced 40 watts from 2 EL34 tubes and included reverb and tremolo. It's worth mentioning at this point that during the Elvis Comeback Special, Elvis borrowed Scotty Moore's 1963 Gibson Super 400 guitar. This guitar had a Florentine cutaway, twin humbucking pickups, and gold-plated hardware. When Elvis began his first tour of 1974, on March the 1st in Tulsa, Oklahoma, He performed on stage for the first time with his 1968 Ebony Gibson J200. Of course, the guitar is similar in construction to his 1960 J200, except for the closed rosewood moustache bridge with the adjustable saddle. Other differences included the Clouson Keystone keyed waffle back tuners and a 3-piece maple back typical for this model year. Elvis performed with the Ebony J200 through most of 1974, but sometime in September, the same Kenpo Karate decal was applied to the lower portion of the body, just like his Ebony Gibson Dove, which we'll talk about in a moment. It was reported that during this time, at some of his performances in Las Vegas, that he would often talk at great length on stage about karate, which of course would have influenced his decision to apply the decal. The ebony finish allowed Gibson to use smaller pieces of unmatched maple, which might be considered unattractive otherwise. Also, the neck is probably a 3-piece construction, although 4 pieces were also used. Elvis continued to perform with this guitar until July the 15th, 1975. And on this date, while performing at the Springfield Civic Center, he broke a string and in frustration went to the rear of the stage and tossed the guitar, presumably to a roadie or to a stagehand in the exit area. A member of the audience, Lawrence Long, who was in attendance that night with his wife Heather at the invitation of friends and sitting in one of the worst possible $5 seats behind the stage, took the only opportunity he thought he would ever get to take a photograph. Fortunately, he captured the image of the guitar in flight and Elvis's aim was a little off. He lowered his camera in time to reach out and catch the guitar as it hit a side railing. He handed it to his wife, who held it up, and Elvis said something to the effect of, "I hope it didn't hit the little lady, she can keep it." And in this photo you can see the lovely Heather and Lawrence Long was Elvis's beautiful Ebony Gibson J200 guitar. The neck of the guitar was slightly cracked and damaged when it hit the railing, but they had managed to repair it and also, of course, the broken string. Larry said that a police officer approached them at the concert and recommended that they leave early. Surrounding fans at the show kept coming up to the couple, some in tears, wanting to touch it, with one lady actually trying to remove the broken string for a souvenir. After the show, Lawrence made a mad dash for his vehicle with the guitar under his coat to his vehicle parked 4 blocks away. They kept the guitar over the years and finally put it up for auction. The guitar was auctioned by Guernsey's in New York on October the 13th, 2002. The J200 sold for $55,000. Until the day they sold it, Lawrence stated that he could still smell Elvis's cologne on the guitar strap, and they still have the broken string. During the early part of 1970, Elvis often performed in concert on stage with both his 1956 J200 and his 1964 Gretsch Country Gentleman, model 6122, serial number 8736. Originally developed as a signature model by Gretsch for Chet Atkins, it is also similar in its features to the one used by George Harrison of the Beatles. The earliest double cutaway Country Gentlemans actually had double screw-up mutes that featured knobs as large as the volume knobs. The finish on these early ones were usually dark walnut over a very flamey maple veneer. All these guitars feature a snap-on leather pad on the back. It hides the plastic trapdoor cover that allows access to the inside of the body. This guitar was unusual in that the 2 pickups were mismatched. The neck pickup was a Supertron 2 with blade pole magnets, while the bridge pickup was a Filtertron pickup with 12 pole pieces. The tuning machines were Grover kidney style buttons instead of the stepped buttons normally found on this model. Though the hardware on this guitar was once gold plated, it has now since faded and tarnished. This guitar is still part of Elvis's collection on display at Graceland. This next guitar, owned by Elvis, is a 1969 Gibson Ebony Dove, sometimes known as the Black Dove. He used it on stage from 1971 until 1973. Elvis performed on tour and in Las Vegas with this Gibson Dove. This was a customized guitar. When Gibson received the request for the guitar, it specified that Elvis's name was to be inlaid on the roseboard fretboard in mother of pearl lettering. The inlay work was done by Gruen Guitars, since Gibson Guitars was in a time of transition and had no craftsman that could accomplish fancy inlay work at the time of the order. The glossy black body featured a 3-ply black-white-black pickguard with no dove inlay. It was just a solid black pickguard. The headstock had a single crown inlay. Twin mother-of-pearl inlaid doves faced each other on opposite sides of the rosewood bridge. On the lower section of the body, Elvis placed a Kenpo karate decal. Elvis dropped this guitar during a 1972 show, but had it repaired. After performing the song CC Rider, the guitar fell and broke off at the joint of the body neck, and he just kicked it off the stage saying, "I really didn't mean to break my guitar." In 1975, he handed to an audience member that had been looking at the guitar and told him, "Hold on to that, hopefully it'll be valuable someday." Mike Harris, the audience member and the guitar's owner, put the guitar on eBay in 2008 and rejected a bid of $85,000. From May until September 1976, Elvis performed on stage with a Sunburst 1974 Guild F50 Jumbo Acoustic. It was made at the Guild factory in Westerly, Rhode Island. It had a 25 5/8 scale length, a 17-inch wide jumbo at the lower bout and 21 inches long, and it had 20 frets. It had a solid spruce top and a select arch laminated maple back. It featured solid maple sides, a 3-piece mahogany mahogany neck, an ebony fretboard with mother-of-pearl and abalone position inlays, rosewood bridge, and gold-plated Grover Rotomatic tuners, and a black pickguard. And here's a great photo of Elvis tossing his beautiful Guild guitar to his good friend Charlie Hodge. From October 1976, Elvis can be seen here performing with a 1976 Martin D35. Martin introduced the D35 with its 3-piece back in 1965 as a result of the shortage of Brazilian rosewood. This allowed them to use up unmatched and small pieces that would have been considered scrap material in previous years. Here's a great photo of Elvis in concert in Atlanta on December the 30th, 1976 with his Martin guitar. The guitar featured a mahogany neck, a 20-fret ebony fingerboard with a 25.4-inch scale length, solid spruce top, rosewood size and 3-piece back. It had an ebony bridge, white binding and white black inlay and a black pickguard. On February the 14th, 1977, whilst performing at the Bayfront Center in St. Petersburg, Florida, Elvis's guitar strap broke, and in frustration, he tossed it in the direction of his good friend Charlie Hodge. Charlie couldn't catch it, and the impact cracked and damaged the spruce top at the bottom end of the guitar. At the time, it was reported that Elvis yelled out to the audience, "Which of you people waited the longest to see me here tonight?" He eventually gave the guitar to a young woman who had waited all night in a lawn chair to be one of the first admitted to the show and was in attendance with her mother. The guitar was sold at an auction in 2002 for somewhere in the area of $20,000. In 2007, the guitar was loaned by its current owner, Robert Johnson of Memphis, to the Smithsonian's Rock and Soul Museum in Memphis. Beginning in Las Vegas on August the 18th, 1975, his new performance guitar was an early to mid-70s Cherry Sunburst Gibson Dove Custom. He performed on this guitar exclusively on tours through till April the 27th, 1976. The Dove model was introduced by Gibson in 1962. It featured book-matched maple back and sides, solid spruce top, a 3-piece maple neck with a 20-fret ebony fingerboard. The Cherry Sunburst was an available finish on the Dove model from 1962 until 1986. The last guitar that Elvis used was a Martin D28, and he used this guitar for his last 56 concerts, including his final show on June the 26th, 1977. Interestingly, this is the same model of Martin guitar that he used when he started his career back in 1955. This guitar was a mid to late 70s model and featured a solid black plastic pickguard. He began using it in February 1977 after dropping and then giving away his Martin D35 on February the 14th. Apparently, even this guitar obtained a crack at some point during those concerts. The Martin D28 features a solid mahogany neck, 20-fret ebony fingerboard with a 25.4-inch scale length. Also, it had a solid spruce top and rosewood back and sides with an ebony bridge. This guitar was ready and packed to go back out on the road. However, Elvis left the building on August the 16th, 1977. Guys, if you've made it this far, thanks very much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe and all that stuff. And just want to say God bless you all. This is Ramon Goose signing out.